Today, we are super excited to explore the mystery of the systems integrator, dun, 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 sometimes called the missing contractor. You might be wondering why we've invited a bunch of lighting designers and lighting people to meet with a lighting integrator that employs some lighting designers. Well, the systems integrator's function is to connect your creative and dynamic lighting designs with unified technology in a functioning installation. They are here to help implement your design, not to compete with your expertise. They are your feet on the street that can help you and clearly express your vision and specification and help you avoid the potential pitfalls and finger pointing. They're your lighting geek squad, if you will. Just as we now have the ability to tune white light with multiple types of controls and pair those systems with various building management systems, some jobs require something even more sophisticated. Media intensive and interactive installations, public light art, any sort of themed exhibit or complex hospitality venue, these are the installations that can best benefit from a systems integrator. But they can help avoid potential problems on all types of projects, large and small, because we know that even static white dimming can get complicated fast. We welcome Eos Light Media, which serves both savvy design firms with a deep technology bench and firms that might be less experienced in complex digital controls. With us today are three people from Eos. First is John Mears, the Director of Business Development. Some of you may know from his history in the New York City marketplace. And joining John are Eugene Mendeleev, Senior Lighting Designer and Programmer, along with Shireen Kamani, Marketing Manager. Each has their own level of expertise in their own field, and they've prepared 2 case studies that will demonstrate where the systems integrator can provide services at different levels of project complexity. Now, for those of you who've not been with us before, at the end of each speaker's presentation, we do a short Q&A. So as usual, we'll ask you to drop your question into the chat bar at any point, and we'll field it when we get to the speaker's question session. And after the presentation, the last Q&A, we're going to do our reveal of the first of 3 design firm projects for the ORA Odyssey. So stay with us. All right, let's get going. It is my pleasure to introduce John Mears. To those of you who may not know him particularly, John has more than 20 years of specification sales experience in the lighting industry and has contributed to many world-renowned museum, retail, and themed projects. Welcome to ORA Shorts, John. How are you?
Good, James. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. The sun is shining. We have a good group and ready to jump into it. So with that, let me say this, John. With technology changing so quickly in so many areas and in impacting architectural design, not the least of which is lighting, technology, and controls, it would appear that even the most experienced design firm can use a little help. What can you share with us about Eos Light Media and that help?
Okay, well, first I put a jacket on just to be in costume for James because he's the best dressed man in New York City.
Thank you.
But for me, first, before we get into EOS, which is obviously something I'm passionate about, we're going to talk about what an integrator, a systems integrator is, and why use one, and how to use one. So we'll jump right in. So the first question is, what is a specialty integrator? And it's a great question. The short answer is it's a bunch of nerds who are into IT, controls, Star Wars, and Comic-Con, basically. So, that's really not the real answer. So Shireen's going to kill me if I don't read the actual marketing term we use, and that is this. The systems integrator takes a complex lighting and audiovisual scope to help ensure that designs are realized to the expectations of the lighting designer, their client, and end user. They're experts in installation, commissioning, programming of complex lighting, audiovisual, and control systems. So let's take a look at this project here. This is a retired blast furnace in Monterrey, Mexico. And to take this furnace into what is a great show, the integrators had to program and commission audiovisual, lighting, and pyrotechnics. This is one that involves some pyrotechnics to create this show that is a huge attraction, a local attraction down in Monterey. Without a systems integrator, a job like this doesn't happen. Let's go to the next slide. So why use a specialty integrator? If you think about this, and James, I keep throwing you under the bus, James. James and I are old enough to remember when this little compact fluorescent on the left was the biggest invention in our industry, and it was a big deal because someone had found a way to make a compact fluorescent look like an A lamp. That's now a museum artifact at best. So what we're talking about is our industry has gone from a filament industry or a gas industry to an IT industry. I mean, all of these things are mini computers now. So we're no longer screwing in lamps, we're screwing in software. And this is where I'm going to sort of go off script a little bit, Shireen, and just say, I've experienced integration on both sides of this market. As a manufacturer for 20 years, again, my life was easy when we were just screwing in lamps. But what happened is my life got complicated when the little LED chips started happening. And when it went down, we started to grow as a company. We wanted to stay on the forefront. So we came out with a control track. We came out with fixtures that were Bluetooth controlled. We came out with a track that had a data line in it. But the long story short of it is that from a beautiful design, a great designer, it could get really messed up on the other end with an EC who doesn't understand the technology or isn't really up to speed with it. So for me, I'll ask the question this: why specify an integrator? The same question could be asked, why specify a particular product? Why not just say, I want a fixture that's 20 watts and I need 50-foot candles on this surface, and leave it up to your electrical contractor to pick a fixture for you? A designer's not going to do that. A good lighting designer is not going to do that. So why leave it when it's a complicated project with a complicated controls? Why leave that to an electrical contractor who's going to do what obviously is best for them, sometimes just best for them in the pocket, right? They're going to look at it and say, how can we do this on the cheap? In the end, this is where a project can fall apart. And I think it's critical, and I wanted to point that out. Let's go to the next slide. So the real, if you want to see why to use a specialty integrator, we call this the 4 E's, or E to the 4th power. So the first is expertise. The lighting and audiovisual world has become extremely interconnected and complicated, and fixtures are now intelligent devices connected by a dedicated network infrastructure. So to not have someone who understands all those complicated parts as the go-between could be a real disaster. So the next is efficiency. So without an integrator on the project, all of these scopes are going to be left to, one of a few others. It's going to be IT engineers, electricians, manufacturers, commissioning agents, and many other trades. And coordinating those scopes without someone who's responsible from, taking the design concept through to completion, someone who's not responsible for all that, leads to the finger pointing and, and comments like, that wasn't in my scope. Hey, I didn't design this. The lighting designer did it. And I'm not going to pay to fix this. What do you mean by compatibility? This is an ELV driver. Those are all the things that could be avoided. And so the next is economy. And economy speaks for itself, because if an integrator is coming onto the job to fix a problem, that's when it's already too late to save money. You're already into the change orders and all the other potential problems. So having an integrator involved up front can help that. And I would say enriched results. If the integrator is a good integrator, then they care about the end result, right? Because if you screw up a job as an integrator, you can't hide from it, right? If it's not working properly, you're off on the next job. No one's going to use you. So the integrator really wants to take the designer's idea and make it happen for them, because they want the designer to specify them again. Let's go to the next slide. So basically, this is just, if your initial project costs, they turn into the SS change order if you don't have an integrator. So let's go to the next screen. So how to use an integrator. So the next slide is going to talk about from a lighting designer standpoint. So I won't read it, but basically a designer can specify, like specifying a product or equipment, they can specify an integrator by name. And some do, and we deal with a lot of companies that do, and some really, really amazingly talented designers. And the truth is, some of them are so talented and so up on the technology, and they have theater backgrounds, they could do this themselves. But the reason they're not is because that's not what they want their scope to be. They want their scope to be designed. So they understand the technology, but they want someone who understands where they're thinking and their expertise to work with them. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we took all the specifications that we've had over the years from specifiers who have listed integrators, and we took it all and put it into one big generic spec, we call it, just in case anybody ever asked, right? So I won't read them all, of course, but I will do the ones we highlighted. So think about the language where it says lighting industry control protocols, including but not limited to, and I'm not going to read all these, but if you see all of those, 0 to 10, SMPTE, and all those catcher, binary closed contact, if you put that in the specification, do you think an EC is going to go, yeah, sure, I can handle that? Putting that in there sort of puts it in the scope of this person has to understand controls. Let's go to the next slide. And this one, this language here is by a very bold and smart lighting design firm. And in the end, the way they put this here is this: they leave nothing to chance. And I like to read this. Systems integrator shall engineer and provide a complete working system based on the design requirements of insert lighting design firm name here, including but not limited to power and data distribution to data controlled fixtures, interfaces between lighting control and show control systems, and control rack requirements. This is basically saying there is no, you cannot go to the job site as an integrator and go, that wasn't in my scope. This designer said, hey, listen, I'm putting you on this spec because you're going to make it happen, and it's your responsibility. And any good integrator is going to want that responsibility. They're going to want that scope, and they're going to want to take that on because, if they're a good integrator, they have pride in their end results as well. Let's go to the next slide, which is the last one. And this just shows you how to list them. And as you can see, on this specification, they listed the best integration firm in the world. I'm not biased, of course, but this is where my portion ends, and I'm going to let Shereen take over. But if James, if you have any questions, or if there are any questions up till now.
Thanks. I don't see any in the queue, but I also wanted to add to this. I think this is an important point to make, particularly in New York. I know geographically the markets don't always work in the same process. But in New York, I think we all know it's very common for the general contractor to give a set of drawings to the chain of suppliers, whether it's the EC, the sub, and say, you're bidding this plans and specs. And they expect that when they get a price back, it's soup to nuts, all in per plans and specs. Now, if the people doing the takeoff aren't astute or have the knowledge of the history, whatever you want to call that, to really get what the spec and the plan, and then the tea leaf part of that, which is what I think the integrator kind of reads and puts together, then there's really this consistent opening for miscommunication. And I think that that's another great reason, even if it's just a pricing exercise, which I know you don't want to hear, it's not a bad idea to find out if the job can support an integrator. I hope you agree with that. Shereen, hi, thanks for jumping in with these guys and keeping us all on pace. Nice to see you. Please share.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having us. So I'll tell you all a little bit about Eos Light Media. So Eos Light Media is a specialty design build firm that pushes the boundaries with light and technology to transform the built environment. With offices located in Vancouver and New York, we're a team made up of lighting, AV systems designers, creative technologists, project managers, procurement specialists, and site supervisors with feet on the ground in Canada and the United States. Our work spans the globe. We've got projects in Asia, the Middle East, and throughout North America. This year's BC Place Stadium in Vancouver, Canada. It's an original CM Kling design, and we do the specialty show programming for this project. And what's really interesting is that we can do it all remotely. So just a few days ago, BC Place wanted to light up blue for World Down Syndrome Day, and Stefan, who's on a job site in Nova Scotia, was able to control the stadium lights from Eastern Canada to have them lit up to bring awareness to the day all the way in Vancouver, Canada. So our work spans across various markets and locations. We work in museums, themed attractions, retail, public art, corporate spaces, hospitalities, and restaurants, to name a few. Our projects vary in scale from smaller sales presentation centers to large museums. and our involvement can either be on the lighting, AV, or interactive software side. Although we can work on events, our primary focus is architectural and permanent installations. Rogers 302 in the bottom right of your screen there is an experience retail store that has AV and lighting working together to create one immersive experience. On this slide, I've highlighted some of our New York City projects, including SoulCycle Hudson Yards, which you can see in the top left, the FDR Museum, the Tempur-Pedic flagship store in Manhattan, luminaries at Brookfield Place, and the 9/11 Memorial Museum. We've worked with Agency Custom, who's also carried by ORA, on the Herald and Harbinger project, which you can see in the top right. This is a Ben Rubin project. This public art piece is programmed to run off of data, so the lights change with the movements of the glaciers in the Canadian Rockies. Right underneath that is another Eos Light Media Agency Custom project, and this is a sensor-based installation. The pillars are programmed to change color as people move towards and away from the columns. So what makes Eos Light Media different? Because we were founded by a lighting designer and have specialty lighting and AV systems designers on our team, we speak the same language in our integration work. We'll understand the conceptual design that's set out by the lighting designer and be able to turn their rendering into reality through our technical design. We can help solve those technical hurdles. So some of the other benefits of working with us is if we're involved early in the design process, we can ensure compatibility, which decreases the potential for errors and lowers overall costs due to proper planning and budgeting. Eos Light Media owns takeoff quantities as a supplier, installer, and programmer. And we're product agnostic, so our loyalties are to the design intent. And lastly, there's no finger pointing at the end of the day because we take responsibility end to end to ensure that the design intent is realized. So with that, I'll pass it off to Eugene Mendeleev, who's our senior lighting designer and programmer. He'll tell you a little bit about his experience and give you some case study examples.
Thank you for that. By the way, just before Eugene, you start, please, John, maybe this question is for you. There was a really interesting cross group of projects in that group of images we just saw. Is there too small a job that an integrator shouldn't be considered integrating into? Oh, you're muted. I hate when that happens. Trust me.
What I was saying was beautiful, by the way. You should have heard it.
Darn it, rewind.
And so, yeah, we've done everything from, huge projects to we're doing a job right now down in Fort Lauderdale area, and it's 6 flowers that are metal flowers that are coming out of the ground that are all color changing. They're about 8 feet tall. So we can do anything from huge to little. It all depends on what they're trying to accomplish.
Got it. Makes sense. And Eugene, welcome to Aura Shorts. I know you've got a lot to share. We're trying to keep the meter running. So please, without further ado, jump in both feet. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, James. So James and John described the lighting integrator in the architectural lighting world accurately as being the missing integrator. Another way that I like to put it to people with a theatrical background is that there's this often forgotten role in theater design world called the production electrician. Their responsibility is to take the lighting design, the venue and building information, and the inventories of equipment suppliers that they have access to, and manage the entirety of the supply and installation. Their job in the theater world is to put into motion everything necessary to ensure that every stick of gear, cable, and accessory needed for rigging, power, data, control systems, atmospherics, practicals, and even wearable technologies of the lighting system get on site on time and are installed and commissioned smoothly. It's their job to get everything ready for the creative team's technical integration to begin. That position of effectively theatrical or specialty lighting integrator traditionally did not exist in architectural lighting. So if a designer wanted to do something that's not in the Leviton catalog, they were often at the mercy of the EC, the GC, or maybe the exhibit fabricator's crew. But luckily, while it can be somewhat complex, it's also a really fun gig sometimes, and we've been delighted to be able to do it in collaboration with the many talented lighting designers and their teams we've had the opportunity to work with. In many ways, I think a lighting integrator is there to give you what you could really use, whether that's a fully tested installation ready for focus and programming, some really nice color and gobo accessory carts, or catching that missing data line between system components on drawings months before install starts. There's also a little bit of a distinction from theatrical dealers. Now, there are many of these who are quite excellent at integration of entertainment-based technology like theatrical spotlights, moving lights, and video walls, color tape. As someone who comes from that world myself, I can say that the background is a great asset, but parts of the specifically architectural lighting world get a lot less fun for many of them when projects get into constant current drivers, proprietary control protocols, coding, and the likes of DALI and BACnet. So these are some of the lighting control and command protocols that a project might need to deal with, depending on what is specified for luminaires and controls for multiple scopes. The integrator needs to be able to troubleshoot these at a technically diagnostic level appropriate to each, whether that's network protocol packet analysis or protocol-specific test hardware and software. It is the integrator's job to make it work. Sometimes a client will need their lighting system to be responsible to inputs from occupancy sensors, pulling live weather data, LiDAR, or gesture input, but also needs to interface with a base building control system designed seemingly by mechanical engineers in the 80s, looking at you, BACnet. And maybe part of the job is doing fixture commissioning on a construction swing stage 900 feet over a major city street. Those are just some of the places where a lighting integrator can make an impact. So for a couple of examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly, for an example of the good, with early integrator involvement resulting in effective integration, one such example is the Jack Chow building. It's a heritage building in Vancouver's Chinatown, and we had an owner-designer with very little technical knowledge, but some really strong concepts for what they wanted. Getting involved later in design developments allowed us to tweak some of the specifications on a couple of their lighting fixtures and fully design the control system. We storyboarded and programmed 6 music-synced architecture object theater shows, which themselves trigger and run the media they're synced to. That project won a Live Design Award. Another good project was a part of the Whitty Museum in San Antonio. It was a pretty complex 6 DMX universe control system with a few hundred controllable fixtures and several large full gallery shows and media synchronized object theater experiences designed by Available Light. The reason that this is a good example is that the design team walked in and were able to decide exactly where they wanted to start. Each area was ready to go. We simply turned on the channels for the first fixtures they pointed at, and they started focusing within 15 to 20 minutes of walking in the door on their first day. So an example of the bad, where there's no integrator scope, some integration from scattered trades, this was some retail and exhibit areas in Detroit's new arena. The designers had to explain to the electrical contractor how to remount fixtures onto structure in a way that allows them to pan and tilt. The design team had to do most of the focus themselves because the electricians simply took significantly longer than the designers could do it. And one of the designers was up on a boom lift being taken around lighting positions on the concourse to commission and focus the theatrical fixtures because the EC was unable to. Instead of a playback controller, the project bought a nice theatrical console for one of the large scope areas that would have no performance lighting programming in it. Everything on the job still worked, but troubleshooting technical issues and doing the contractor's work for them slowed down the design team significantly. And the owner group ended up paying for control equipment that was expensively overkill for the application. For an example of the ugly, where there's virtually no integrator involvement until spec procurement stage and minimal critical integration, there was a project in Central Texas, which shall remain unnamed, where some value engineering removed a good power control piece of equipment and replaced it with a not so good one, which was incapable of taking full control over some of the fixture types in the space. The newly VE'd system also couldn't be commissioned until the EC verified a component of the installation that was complete, which wasn't in their scope of work. There was no interconnection with base building lighting controls, and that system was not even properly commissioned. To our knowledge, the work lights might still be coming on every morning in some of the gallery spaces. Our late involvement did not allow us to identify key system design flaws prior to construction scopes and equipment choices being locked in. Several things simply didn't work. So what makes for a smooth install? To me, it's all about preparation, and that's technical, scheduling, and creative. Like a good production electrician, I like arriving on site with all the fixtures, trim rings, rigging hardware, all of it. In the planning stage, control system interfacing has been designed and reviewed with all parties: the lighting designer, the base building electrical engineer, the lighting controls contractor, base building IT, audio visual, and the technicians who will be managing the system after day one. At this stage, data runs and terminations have been planned out. A clear control narrative has been developed with the lighting design team, and control channel allocations both within the DMX, AC, and protocol universes, as well as between zones and galleries and playbacks need to be separated, has been determined. A set of control and programming and playback systems has been selected, and an expert programmer and controls commissioning agents guide the final stages of installation. There is a deliberate overlap with the lighting integrator's site schedule with also the rest of the teams who are responsible for the systems we're integrating with. So some common pitfalls. I'll only go through a couple of these. One common one is allowing the fixture manufacturer to take over controls design. Most lighting manufacturers of controllable lighting fixtures have some sort of control components or partnerships they will gladly add to your lighting package. This may not be the right control system for what you need. Involving a controls designer like a lighting integrator early on will help determine whether this control direction will meet all of the current potential requirements of the job. After all, no one wants the client to buy a Lamborghini for off-roading or a smart car to tow a boat. Another pitfall is hyper-focusing on the controls design approach. Should those fixtures really be 0 to 10 volt control because we've always done it that way? Or is DMX ACN better? Or is it best to use the proprietary protocol of the other fixtures in the space and some sort of adaptation hardware? What's the difference? It can be a big one in terms of capability and flexibility you end up leaving your client. On a typical year, we extensively use some, but in various ways touch most of these protocols that we looked at on the other slide. There's a lot of choices to make. Another pitfall is leaving controls commissioning and programming to the electrical contractor. This is something we found to end up costing more for everyone involved by taking more time, as they either have to do it themselves, which again is, if it's not in the Lutron catalog, might not be possible, or they have to go out and find one or more controls contractors to do those parts of the work. There's more layers between the designer and the programmer, and there's often more markup layers between the programmer and the owner. A programmer's role is to take the three-dimensional design that's been created by the lighting designer and make it come alive in this fourth dimension of time. I love that time. It's kind of my favorite part of the process. It's where I consider the rubber of design to meet the road. The designer is typically entirely at the mercy of that programmer's skill, though, as a programmer on that particular control system. And there's a big difference between knowing how to drive a car and being able to push a specific car to its limits and make it do things that maybe even the designer hadn't imagined was an option. Having a good integrator who can supply the project with expert level programmers who are involved in the control system design at early stages has a massive impact on the overall final product your client sees. The last pitfall I'm going to talk about is networking. So as John alluded earlier, there are very few lighting control options anymore that do not require at least some amount of network protocols. Your controls designer wants to be in contact with base building IT and any other trades where there might be controls interfacing. There's common pitfalls within networking itself. Do you need broadcast, unicast, multicast? What about IGMP snooping? VLANs, QoS? You probably do. And is the current network layout missing some sort of magic wire connecting two critical systems together? When I got into lighting, I did not expect to also become a part-time network system administrator, but it looks like that's one of the costs of having all this fancy gear we spec. So lastly, I'm just going to talk about a case study. This is the National Museum of African American Music in Nashville, Tennessee. This was a really fun project, and I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. This was also a project that was mostly installed and fully wrapped up in the last year, with some programming, I think, getting touched up as recently as last month. This was also one of my first projects in COVID times, as we got down to final detail control specification in June of 2020 for install starting in September. As it was a whole new world, we took a bit of a different approach to design, as much more remote access and programming capability into the system as we could. The lighting designer on the project was Available Light, and we collaborated with them closely to update the system design to allow full remote programming capability while still being able to fully interface on both programming and playback controllers with both exhibit lighting systems as well as base building lighting control, the exhibit AV system, and base building IT. I was able to do all of that from my house in the foothills of the Canadian Rockies. We worked with one of Available Light's designer programmers who used a rental lighting console to connect to one of our networks and allow it to do all the SMPTE timecode programming live with the lighting designer. And then when they had a day's worth of programming to transfer to the playback hardware system and test it out, triggered properly by the AV system, they gave me a call and I jumped online onto our dedicated site machine in the control rack in Nashville with basically all of the programming capabilities as if I was physically there. One of the challenges on the job was that we did have a missing magic wire, this time between the AV integrator's control system and the base building lighting control system. As several of the devices in our lighting control system spans both of those building networks, we were able to program our playback hardware to function as the missing link with some UDP commands. Another one of the challenges was COVID in a very real way. We've learned a lot over the last year about mitigating a whole new level of risk. And at the time of our team's second trip on site, Nashville was turning into a bit of a hot spot, and we had to pull most of our out-of-town crew from site. Our installation manager on the project, Jillian, was able to mobilize and actively manage local resources in Nashville to finish the scope of work. And whether it's through using technology to shorten the distance between office and site, or leaning on our US-based site managers and lead technicians in New York, New Jersey, DC, Philly, or a larger network of skilled labor, we've been able to make our job sites a lot safer for everyone on them. The final product of the project is this fun, dramatic, really dynamic set of spaces by Available Light that help tell the stories of African-American music history. And if something needs to be tweaked or troubleshot at this point, I can still jump online right now. So for our next case study, I'm going to pass it back over to John Mears. Thank you.
I unmuted this time, James.
Shucks.
So everybody recognizes this project. I shouldn't say everybody, but if you're a New Yorker, you probably do. What I like to point out about this project is, you know, we go from Available Light, which is they're just so good at drama, right? The color changing and all these things that just bring out the punch in museums. But this museum is a white light museum. This, you know, and a lot of times when you look at this, you would say, why is there an integrator involved? I was involved in this project on both sides of it. So as a manufacturer, we had the lion's share of the product in this museum when I was with Lighting Services, Inc. So, but this project, it was heavily intricate. There was a lot of custom controls, a lot of intricate controls. And it turns out Eos Light Media was hired through the exhibit fabricator, which is Hadley Exhibits. So Fisher Moran Stone was the lighting design firm. Hadley Exhibits was the exhibit fabricator. They hired Eos. And I can tell you, this is a huge project that we never got a call back on. And as a manufacturer, you don't want calls back, right? Because usually when a light's flickering, they blame the manufacturer, even though it's probably a controls and driver thing, the manufacturer gets the call. No calls back. Eos did a great job. I worked with Bobby Baines on this from Eos, who was the integrator. And in the end, what I like to point out, and this is actually, we had a little conversation with Bobby the other day to sort of tell us a little bit about his experience on this one. And what was interesting is Eos had a particular scope with Hadley Exhibits, but after the way they navigated, you know, the local electricians and the local unions and everything else, the GC approached our project manager on site and asked if we'd take on a larger scope. And Eos's scope ended up doubling, and we actually ended up subcontracting to 3 different electricians and manage those electricians on site to complete this job. So I can tell you, I'm proud from both sides of this that I'm with the company that is the glue that held this thing together. And I'm proud that I was involved in the initial project with Fisher Morant's. I think that's it, James. Thank you guys for your time.
Well, that was very informative. It's a fascinating moving target, I think, all of this, as technology is going to continue to advance and integration is only going to become more complex. This was very helpful, and I hope that everyone has a better understanding of what it is you guys really are able to bring to the dance. So with that, we're going to now loosen up our ties and share with you our out of this world designer challenge. We've challenged 3 design firms to help save all mankind on our new planet. Our first team, coming to you from Dot Lighting Design, sponsored by Barnlight Electric, selected the agriculture theme. They were tasked with creating a logo that represents agriculture and an entrance that communicates a thriving future ahead. This was a blind challenge, similar to our first 2 Chit Chat challenges. The designers agreed to receive a box filled with miscellaneous components, along with a stated mission to fulfill using only their design skills and the contents of the box. Pretty cool stuff. Here comes the very first reveal with Dot Lighting Design. Let's see it, Carl.
What were your top 3 considerations for surviving and thriving?
The idea of a vertical farming, vertical agriculture, being in a lobby space, but being able to look up and kind of see, have like one big view where you see kind of everything at once and you can kind of understand
agriculture
like,
being visible, and like the vertical layers and kind of conserving space and building upwards instead of just making like a huge like warehouse style building.
their fixture selection was actually a pretty like smooth, like easy, like they had a very easy product line to use for.
Specifically looked for barn lights more, I don't know, Taylor, like science,
Industrial,
yeah, like science-y look.
Yeah, it was actually cool. They have, I mean, once we dug into their product line, they have like these NASA, like a NASA post lamp. It's really cool. So yeah, we could kind of find these like more like techie, sciencey, industrial fixtures.
We also used a lot of their nautical fixtures.
Mm-hmm.
Like in their nautical line, it felt like very related to space exploration, right? Like harsh conditions and things that you would want those lights to have, like robust features.
And there you have it. That completes our Aura Shorts for this hour. We want to salute Dot Dash Design for their courage and putting it out there, accepting the challenge and jumping in and having some fun with it. And we thank our sponsoring manufacturers for participating in the challenge as well. As a reminder and as a courtesy to you and your time, we really would like your feedback on the times of day that we offer these, perhaps the days of the week that we offer our sessions. If you have any feedback at all, please email us at questions@aurashorts.com. The complete library of Aura Shorts is available online 24/7 and for your streaming pleasure at O'Blaney Rinker Associates YouTube page. And as a reminder, we keep our Pinterest page freshly stocked with images and inspirational images provided by our manufacturing partners. So please check those out as well. Mark your calendar for our next Aura Shorts event on April the 8th. And of course, we hope to see you then. Until then, thank you again for joining us. We know your time is valuable and we appreciate your support, as do all of our manufacturing partners. Take good care and be safe. See you next time.